How is everybody doing? Thank you for coming. This is the Multifamily Mastery Meetup, of course. I'm your host, Cole Farrell. Give you a really quick backstory on who I am, even though I know just about every one of you. I started investing when I was super young. I was 18. Seller finance duplex, started buying more, raised money from family, maxed out all of our family money, so went elsewhere, started doing property management, construction, got into flips, wholesale with the partner, and loved that stuff. And then I always wanted to go into large multi, so headed that route, started a syndication firm, and do that now. So it's been a fun journey. Before we get into the interview, we have an awesome sponsor tonight. He's been sponsoring for a while, and he's not here, unfortunately, but 𝐁𝐵 with GSM Commercial Capital. All his info is on the table. Gary is a national direct lender, DSCR lender, bridge loans, agency, whatever it is you need, Gary does it. He has 33 years of experience in finance. He worked on Wall Street. He's raised $6 billion in capital. And I've used him on just about every loan that we have. So I do personally recommend him, not just as a sponsorship side, but I've worked with Gary extensively, and he's very easy and fun to work with. So his info is over there. Like I said, pick it up, give him a call. Before we get started, a couple housekeeping items. We have food and drink right over here, as always. So please grab some and eat it so we don't have to take it home. We upgraded our sign-in. It's just now a tablet. And if it's not on, we're working through the kinks here. So if everyone can do me a huge favor and sign in on that tablet, that'd be amazing. There's also a survey. So if there's anything you want to hear about or things you don't like, you can just click through the buttons. Really cool. So we'd appreciate it. And lastly, our goal is to help propel you on your journey. So wherever you're at, if you're starting, you're advanced, wherever, I'd love to see what you're working on and see if I can help or give any input. So please come talk to me afterwards. That would be awesome. Structure, as always, we're going to have our guest speaker. We're going to do a little outro, and then we're going to just hang out and network. Now, before we jump in, special event, which I'm super excited for. This is our 36th event, which is 3 years, and it's just a cool milestone. So super excited for that. Can't believe it's been 3 years already, and there's a lot of people here that have been to that very first event, and it's been a journey. So Thank you. It's exciting. So to all you guys for always coming out, appreciate it. All right, tonight we have John Becker here, independent real estate investor. He's in 4 different states. He owns 100 units. He doesn't have a lot of partners or any partners. Right. And I'm not going to go deep into your story. I'm going to let you tell it yourself. So wherever you want to jump in.
Yeah. I got a lot of crazy stories we could tell, of course. I started kind of accidentally. I was on Nantucket Island in 2011. That's where I bought my first house. At that time, everything was dirt cheap, of course. It was just barely cash flowing, actually. So we bought this house. It was way bigger than we needed. It was 3 bathrooms. Yeah, 3 bathrooms. And like a ton of bedrooms. There was like 4 bedrooms. And then there was like a basement that was, not finished kind of, but there was a bathroom down there. So we lived right in the basement. No, I lived right in the basement. We rented out the main house. The whole time I owned that house, I never lived in the main house. And that started paying the mortgage. And we started reappraising it and refinancing that. That was kind of awesome. So that really helped a lot. I mean, I could have used that to compound quite a bit and pick up more assets. I didn't. But now, and that's been such a crazy blessing. So I was working on Nantucket at the time with Verizon. And 2 years later, they told me, hey, we're going to lay you off, or you're going to take a job in Providence, Rhode Island. So at the time, I was married and a young family. So I chose the security and went to Rhode Island. And I have not seen that house in the flesh in 12 years, 11 years. I've refinanced it 5 times without looking at it. My tenants put a roof on for me. It's insane. So I was like dreaming up. I've always been the kind of guy to do like everything myself. And there's definitely like a point where that makes a lot of sense. But I think at some point it doesn't make sense anymore, right? So right when I was buying all the New Jersey stuff, I was refinancing Nantucket. And they were like, oh, we don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, but you need a new roof. We're going to hold back 10 grand. I was like, who cares, right? Whatever, hold back 10 grand. But then we decided we were going to do the roof. And I was like, oh, I can go to Beacon and I can get, get my box truck in there. I have a box truck. Oh, this thing is the most hideous vehicle. So I have a rider truck. I bought this thing in New Hampshire for like $1,000, and I didn't get a good deal at the time. Picture like a yellow rider that was so old it's retired, and it's spray painted white, and they didn't do a good job. And this thing was the most hideous vehicle on Nantucket all day long. When I bought it, it had no ramp. They told me it fell off on the highway or whatever. When I bought it, it had one of the dually tires was flat. And they were like, oh, we'll just give you money off. I actually didn't ever fix it. I just drove a flat tire. I got it down to the boat. That was like my shed. Anyway, I was like, okay, I'm going to get this thing and I'm going to load up on roofing supplies, go back down to Nantucket. And that was crazy. The boat was backed up till 3 months. It was insane. I had just taken that truck off the road. So I was calling the insurance company. I got to get this thing back on my policy. They were like, this thing should have never been on your policy. I had it on my policy 10 years. And they're like, no, you're not putting that on the policy at all. So I ended up, I mean, it kind of forced me to just be smarter about my process. And that was huge, because sometimes I'm really stubborn about just doing everything myself. I'm going to find a way. So, picked up the phone, called Beacon. They shipped it to the island. It got there. They took a picture. My people got to work roofing the house. Still haven't seen the house. So, I mean, I bought it for 400. It's worth maybe 1.9 or something.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you bought this house in Nantucket.
Yeah.
It appreciated. Did you do anything, rehab it, anything, or it just kind of steadily grew?
At the time, so I bought it 13 years ago. In the house, I did almost nothing. In the basement, I kind of built, I had some friends who were cabinet makers. I was not very handy at the time, but I'm like, we're going to make this work, right? So I was running hoses to kitchen sinks. I got a bunch of cabinets that didn't fit together. The pictures from the appraisal show that my people put in a whole new kitchen in the basement. Praise God for that. So I had no idea. So it was great.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So that's insane.
So house in Nantucket.
Yep.
Refinanced it a couple times. And then what was the next step after that? Kind of where did that lead?
Yeah. So I bought that house 2011. 2013, I moved to Rhode Island. And I was kind of excited at the time, because I was like, you can buy things in cash flow. Even at that time, you couldn't really buy things in cash flow reliably on Nantucket. And you're never going to do it today. Absolutely not. Even in COVID, you couldn't do it. But in Rhode Island, you could. And I looked at some places. I'm like, well, if you're going to buy a 4-unit, might as well go 6. If you can do a 6, might as well. I bought this 16-unit place. And I would that place for me, it was kind of like a full-time job in addition to my regular full-time job. So it was a lot. I did a ton of stuff there. Converted it from septic to sewer, converted from propane to gas, rebuilt all the units. It did appreciate because I bought it in 2013 and rents were pretty low. Rents have gone up. But if I did everything over again, I would have probably picked up more assets and done kind of like a more Burr system. For me, that represented too much of my own personal life put into one asset.
That's fair.
That's kind of what I think about that place. It's great now. It's a cash cow, but for a while it was a struggle.
So went in, did a lot of renovations, a lot of it yourself.
Yeah.
Got it up to, I guess, optimized, stabilized.
Yeah.
What happened next? Did you keep it? Did you just hold it? Or
I kept it. I held it, and I stayed working. I didn't really like the idea of buying other houses because I was like, oh, it's so nice here. It's so comfortable for me. I got my shed in back with all my tools and all the supplies, and I had a huge amount of stock, like pressure-treated wood and sinks and faucets and everything. So whatever broke, I could handle it right there. So that was awesome, but it also kind of capped my potential a little bit. I just kind of stayed working, and there was a divorce in there too. So it was like a rough time personally for me.
Wow.
But so for many years, I didn't really do anything. That was time that I could have been growing.
Okay. So you're at 17 at that point.
Yeah.
At what point did you go, okay, I got to make the next step. I got to buy something else?
Yeah. Well, 2021, I was starting to kind of leave my job, my regular W-2. And like everybody else, I thought I was going to be a fund manager. So I had all these crazy systems I was working, did reasonably well. But most of that was cash from Nantucket, actually. And I kind of took 110 to 410 and back down to 250. That's basically what happened.
Explain that. What do you mean?
So when I started trying to trade, I had $100,000 in cash.
Oh, trading. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we took it up to 410, and then it came down to like I was starting to cut exposure. Came down to 250, and that's where I just cut everything. And I was like, oh, well, this isn't the future. So at that time I was like, I was kind of feeling pretty down about that. And I was looking for, kind of stuff to buy. It didn't seem like a lot of things made sense. And I'm a Christian. I was really seeking God a lot in this time of my life.
Okay.
And I really feel like he brought me to this New Jersey transaction. So yeah, I met somebody in one of the networks who he was looking to sell, like at the time it was like 73 units all in one shot. And he wanted his number, but he could pay seller financing. He could do, pay for the closing costs. That seemed like a good combination. That meeting almost didn't happen.
Wow.
But I mean, in the end analysis, I took over 60 of these units all at once.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Is it like a portfolio? Was it a single building? Was it spread apart? Like, what did that New Jersey asset look like?
Yeah, it was 28 buildings.
Okay.
So duplexes, triples, a couple fours, a couple ones. I guess if we do the math, there has to be a couple ones in there, but there are a couple ones. I mean, I was really struck coming down this way. So, I mean, anybody like from Rhode Island, Boston area? Okay. Yeah. When you go down there and you look at stuff that cash flows, it's not pretty. Concrete jungle, broken up concrete, like fence poles all rusted out. I mean, it's like you don't really want to live there. It's not really attractive to a house hacker, right? I mean, and I was really attracted to, at the time in this area, you could buy places that were nice. Like they had nice yards and like, coming from Rhode Island, it seemed like you were able to buy an asset that actually cash flowed, and it's a decent enough asset to like attract decent people.
That's crazy. So you met this guy at a meetup. Was it similar to this, or was it more like just a meetup, I guess?
It wasn't like, so I didn't really meet him at a meetup. He was a part of like a group.
Oh, I see.
So
okay.
It was like a friend of a friend kind of.
Okay.
So this is crazy. So, I mean, I almost didn't even meet this guy, but we did a Zoom, made a lot of sense. And I went down there to meet with the guy in his house. We hashed out kind of the beginnings of a deal. And I mean, this is where it really was divine, because God kind of like created the situation. It was perfect for me. And the deal as originally envisioned would have him be a partner. But he backed out of that part of it.
Wow.
And that was actually, I was like, oh man, this kind of sucks. I have more capital exposure here than I expected to have. But he went on to get into a lot of trouble with the law.
Wow.
So it was actually really good for me that he did.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to come back to that in a minute. But I want to finish up your story. So
sure.
You found that Jersey asset. So that was 73 or 60 units, did you say?
60 units. So
60
we
units.
tried to do like his whole portfolio. Some of them didn't appraise. Some of them, we couldn't appraise them at all because they had been, vandalized. Some of them, fire damage. So it came down to 60 that actually transferred.
Okay. So transfer those units. What did the business plan look like? Did you do anything to those? Did you just purchase them and run them? How did that go?
Yeah. Well, I'm a big time, like, I'll run my own stuff and I'll find a way to do it, right? So, yeah, first couple months were crazy. We had some evictions in progress. We had a lot of good people. Thank God for that. We had some people not so good. So I want to say there were like 10 of those units were either being evicted or pretty close to that point.
It's a good portion.
Yeah. So I was flipping these things. I had painters that did an okay job. I had floor people that did an okay job. I love doing plumbing and electrical. So I was doing all that. And
that's awesome.
Fortunately, like, it wasn't like they were falling down. No roofs were leaking. So these were like the guy I bought from, he was a big time flipper. So like the big things had been addressed. He had already picked these things up at like crazy dirt cheap prices. And he was trying to like basically sell them to somebody who wanted a turnkey operation. Okay. So it was kind of a turnkey operation, except that some of the units needed some love because they hadn't been addressed in a long time.
Maybe he was a little better at flipping, less at managing, and so you took that over and improved it.
Yeah.
So you got that stabilized.
Yeah.
You had your other assets still. And so what next? Where does the last piece come in?
Yeah. So So, I mean, I wanted to try to diversify my risk away from New Jersey. I was really starting to see my role as managing assets as opposed to like fixing everything.
Right.
It's a hard transition, man, because I'm kind of stubborn. I'm like, I can fix everything. I'm going to fix everything, but you can't. So I had a close friend, went out to Ohio, and this is a different real estate group. And he was saying, look, you guys, you got to pay attention out here because there's some good cash flow opportunity. He became like 10% owner of a company with some relatives of his. And he basically runs it. It's 160 units or something like that. And so we were pretty close. And he was like, look, you got to get started out here. You know, I'll kind of manage your first flip.
Wow.
So we did. It was right on MLS. It was a 4 unit for $100,000 in Dayton. Bought that and went through a ton of banks. The banks were like, oh, you're too leveraged. We don't want to work with you. Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, the stuff is cash flowing. You know, it's crazy. We don't want to work with you. So, and then we found somebody who was kind of willing to do it. And then they said, oh, we changed our whole operation. So this was actually, it was Civic. I don't know if you're familiar with Civic.
Heard of them.
They did a ton of stuff. And then they kind of like, yeah, I don't know how much we can say. But anyway, they were going to do it and they decided not to. So the seller financed it.
Wow.
Yeah, seller financed it 75%.
That's amazing.
100%.
Does everyone here know what seller financing is? I guess for anybody that doesn't know, give them a quick synopsis.
So the seller's like, hey, you don't have to get a mortgage. We'll write a mortgage between you and me. You bring $25,000. You can buy this house. You owe me $75,000. And we had a balloon, but they don't always have balloons. We had a regular monthly payment based on, I think it was 6%, which was great. We bird out of it, so whatever. But yeah, so that's what it was. $25,000. I bought that fourplex. 75 was the mortgage, and put 40 into it. So I'm into it for 140. It appraised at 195. Got a loan against it for 146.
Awesome.
And it's cash flowing now.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
so at this point, you're in Rhode Island, Jersey, Ohio, and then what next? You got the 4 unit.
Yeah. So Massachusetts, Rhode Island, those are the two beginner assets.
Oh, Massachusetts as well.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
New Jersey is the big one that I kind of run every day, and you know, I definitely could be more efficient about that. But yeah, Ohio and growing in Ohio, So I mean, if you're going to be out of state, you got to think about some things, right? Like, you know, you can't be there in an hour. You got to have partners that you can trust, solid people you can work with. You got to have partners for debt, right? You got to have partners for getting the deals, managing these places, and contractors to manage the flips, manage the work you're doing. So I think if you have those 4 pieces and you're in an area that cash flows, that's a good combination. And a part of me was like, you know, how many times am I going to have a chance like this? So I kind of bit that pretty hard, actually, last year, 2023. And October itself, we bought like 15 in October.
Is this in Dayton?
It was in Ohio.
In Ohio.
So not necessarily. I'm in Dayton, but I'm also in some other places.
Okay. Awesome.
So yeah, I mean it's a great place.
And that was the 15 that you just picked up recently. Were those the most recent that you just purchased? Because I remember we talked recently and you just ended some.
Correct.
Okay.
So I bought like in October, I went from like 84 up to, and there was one in New Jersey I bought last year too. Oh. So I went from 84 and it became 85 to 100. So it's at 100 even right now.
Congrats.
Which is insane. Yeah.
So I want to go back to a couple different pieces. So one, you worked your full-time job, you then moved, and then you slowly transitioned out of it. What was that experience like, kind of transitioning out of it? Was it a struggle? Were there signs that you're like, I got to get out of this? Because a lot of people hit that block.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't need a job, right? Rhode Island was cash flowing. It was fine. Like, I didn't really need it. It was more like, okay, I mean, you got golden handcuffs. I was paid well to do, you know, do really basic things. And, you know, so, but there was part of me that was really not satisfied with that. And I wanted to go and build something, do something else. And there was an opportunity during COVID. They shut the office down. I was like, well, I'll just take a leave of absence. You know, the options were work from home or take a leave of absence. So I took a leave of absence.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and basically from then on, I was very intermittent, finally cut the cord in 2022.
And you had enough cash flow to support you, obviously, and that's kind of how you made the leap. Is that right? Because I think a lot of people have this idea that they should just quit their job and get into real estate. And I want to stress it's probably not a good idea.
Right.
Definitely talk to some other people that have done it, and they would tell you against it. So I like that you said that.
And I think with rates high and prices crazy, and people are like, oh, this doesn't make sense. It's just bringing us back to the basics of this business, right? House hacking, burring. Sometimes you got to burr a place and house hack it. We're getting back, finding the deal, getting back to the basics of the business. And I think that's important because I think when rates are 3%, people get crazy and they say stupid things on TikTok and people believe them.
That's so good. And so you have these properties in different states, and you talked about having the right team. So what do you think is the biggest piece, or kind of one of the things that's leading you to be successful in different markets that you can't be in so quickly? Is it just the team, or what's one of the secrets?
Oh, I know. I owe so much to my team. There's no question. You got to have good people, and you got to trust them. You got to have good people that you can trust, and you got to work with them. It helped a lot. That I feel like one thing in this business is you got to figure out what you're good at. I'm a little bit like spectrum-y. I'm it's not bad, but it's so sometimes I have trouble reading people the same way. So it meant a lot to me that a friend of mine that I trusted, he trusted some people. So that was a big thing for me.
Okay.
So that was really key for me. Probably if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have done it.
That's so interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
It's so true,
I see that as the future now.
The out of state, you mean?
Yeah.
It's crazy. We just kind of got into that ourselves, and it's interesting. It's all about the team, and it's just kind of trying to manage other people effectively, and it's interesting to see how many different things pop up.
Yeah.
But it's also a really good exercise in kind of control and figuring out how to communicate with people and improve rather than just, I'll just go do it myself. And I like that you mentioned you had that transition of okay, I got to lay off. This is getting bigger than just me.
Right.
I got to kind of grow.
Yeah. And Ohio, labor is cheap. Even if I lived there, I really shouldn't be doing that. It's a horrible use of my time. Somebody could argue in Jersey, I should be doing what I'm doing, which is fine. But I think over time, moving more capital out to the growth areas is good. And I think you hit on something which was really cool. You have, I don't remember. I want to say so let's say you have a body of assets and you have a very small amount of equity in those assets. That equity is really performing well for you. But as that equity grows, you can start to think about, okay, what's my return on this equity, right? Because if you take the cash on cash analysis, if you bought the property with that loan in place and you brought all that cash to the table, maybe that equity is not performing so highly for you. So you should be thinking about scaling into a higher return on capital.
That's so good. And just to reverberate for anybody that didn't hear that or just want to hear it a second time, that's so good. It's just you start off buying for your cash on cash or something like that. And that's always important. But as your equity grows, you need to start looking at, is your equity being used at its optimal point, or should you start using the equity that you built and go not diversify, but invest with that. So I love that.
100%. And I want to go back to the team real quick.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to have good people. You got to take care of them, pay them fair. Don't negotiate the heck out of that situation. Don't beat them up like crazy over price. You got to take care of these people. I spend $2,000 every Christmas on gift baskets, and I don't negotiate hard with them.
As far as your team goes, do you have a lot of systems and processes to make sure everything's done a certain way, or do you kind of let the team just do their thing? And how do you run that?
Well, generally they're out of state. They know that state better than I do.
Fair.
So especially if you're looking at somebody and they've been doing their thing a long time, you should assume that they have something to teach you. You should go into any interaction with the idea that, okay, they know more than I do. Because if you go in with the opposite perspective, it's not going to work out.
I love that. It's just being coachable.
Yeah, you have to be coachable in this business. This business is moving and the market is moving. It is changing. If you're not teachable, you'll be washed out.
Love that. Yeah. I want to go back to, you mentioned that there was a deal that you almost had a partner on, and you've done things, yourself. So what are your opinions on that? I know a lot of people don't like partnerships. A lot of people love partnerships. So do you have any kind of specific opinions, or just kind of whatever?
I mean, it has to be special. It can work really, really well. I feel like it works best if you knew this person and you were tight before real estate. I think probably the most successful partnerships are like that. It can develop otherwise too. Yeah. I mean, it's something I don't necessarily know a whole lot about as far as that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What do you think? So scaling as you did and kind of kept pac-manning and buying more, what were the biggest challenges as you scaled? Were there a couple things that you hit that were like major hurdles?
Well, one thing that really shocked me was how well New Jersey was well suited to what I was already good at.
Hmm.
So like, I mean, I can, tenants have my phone number and I can be there and I can take care of anything very quickly. I got a work truck with all the tools, a bunch of stock, like whatever breaks more than twice, I've got 5 of them, So that process is really cool. And I don't remember your question.
Um,
What were the challenges in scaling? So
yes.
New Jersey was really good in that. And I think as I'm transitioning my thinking more towards managing assets, I think that is, it's just like, being adaptable. And, because I know that the best use of my time and capital is, managing assets rather than toilets, and I think moving more of my time and effort into that basket.
What made that light bulb go off? Like, was there a time when you're like, I got to change this? Like, this is no longer working.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of people struggle with that. So I'm curious, did you have an experience or like, at what point did you say, okay, I've had enough. I need help?
Yeah. Well, look at your PFS and say, look, it's more important that this stuff is well run than this particular little issue is fixed. I mean, at some point, the scale becomes like your number one job is to make sure the portfolio is healthy. Keep that train on the tracks. Keep that train moving. And, if you're taking away from that role, you're hurting yourself.
Do you think it's necessary, or do you think somebody should start doing everything themselves in the beginning, or do you think they should hire out of the gate?
I think most people, I mean, it depends on what you're good at. I think it works really well. There's a lot of buzz today about, never doing your own work, and real estate investing is just, getting checks in the mail and, it's just paperwork. I mean, I think that's really overblown. There are a lot of people who are really good at administration and they can probably handle that. But a lot of people are fighting over that role. And not a lot of people are fighting over buying the 3 unit and doing their work and burring it and doing it again in 24 months, 12 months. I mean, you do that for 10 years, you're going to have a lot of equity. You're going to have a commanding position. I mean, not a lot of people are fighting over that.
That's so good. And just so many people here I know are nodding their heads going like, yep, absolutely. So
I don't want to take anything away from people who are natural born leaders and administrators, because that's awesome. That's a great gift. It's not my gift. And I think a lot of people maybe could benefit from the other side of it.
I love that. So powerful. You have so many different parts of your story, and I think there's so many different ways to go in. So I want to kind of open up for Q&A and just, does anybody have any questions, specifics, anything like that for John?
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned your team members. In each state, do you have each of those members in every state, or do you just have those 4 members you mentioned for all?
Okay, so my team is a recent thing. I have a team in Ohio. My Massachusetts tenants are awesome. Never bother me at all. Never a problem. Like I said, I have not looked at that house. They fixed it. I haven't looked at that house in 12 years. Rhode Island, I go back there and handle emergencies. When I bought it with a manager. She was very good. She had lived there 7 years previous to that, and I've owned it 10 years now. So she's lived there 17 years, 10 as my manager, 7 years as the previous person's manager. So she is able to fix most things. I have to go, I went back there kind of in the middle of the night. I had a boiler issue. I got a bunch of crazy stories with that property. So I have one of those high-tech boilers, like it's a computer-controlled, sealed combustion. It's like a Munchkin 140. And it came with the property. Every year it's doing something stupid. And we had no heat. And this is like late February or something. I call my boiler guy. He's in the hospital. I don't know. I just have not worked with anybody else. So I'm like, I'm going to go out there and do it. So I do. I get there. Get there like 1 in the morning, start figuring it out. It's one of those boilers with like a code on the screen and all this. So I think it's the gas valve. I also think it needs to be cleaned up. So I take it apart, clean it up, put it back together, get the gas valve, put it back together, and it's not working at all. And I decided I was just done with that thing. So atmospheric boilers, I know how they work. I can use them. Found one, basically a scratch and dent situation in New Hampshire. Drive up there and get it, bring it back. 7 p.m. that night, I start working, and it was working 18 hours later.
There you go.
So I mean, like, you know, that's my skill set. That's what I'm good at. I can take apart a machine and figure it out. I think when you're just starting out, I'm in a boiler. Not everybody's gonna do that, but you got to be comfortable with some level of that when you're just starting out. And I think, you know, I saved myself $6,000, or pick a number. I don't know what the number is. You know, that's the reality of, I think, this business.
Yeah. And to answer your question too a little further is just, I think it depends on proximity. So yes, you should have each of those team members in each place. But if you're in like a collective, relatively small area, you could probably use the same ones. It just depends on, are they going to actually go to the other area? And if they're not, yes, you need a different person for that spot. So
yeah. The team was key to my Ohio situation because I never lived there. And I didn't really understand the market that well. So I think a lot of East Coasters go to Ohio and they're like, oh, everything cash flows. Well, some parts of the Midwest have structural vacancy. There are too many houses in some of these areas. I mean, the city of Dayton is knocking down city blocks at a time. Like, there's no affordable housing conversation out there. Everything's affordable because there's not enough people to fill the houses. Here, you know, New England, Northeast, it's the opposite.
interesting.
There was a question over here. Yeah. I love that question. Yeah. Oh, I want to give you a star. Can I give you a star? I think about that a lot. I levered it as much as I could in 2022. I expect that area to appreciate better than the national average. It has, and I expect it to continue to. So in my analysis, it's also going to appreciate better than the national average. That's realistically, that's return. So I have not sold it, but that's an excellent question.
So you did lever it, and now you're going to expand on that. So
yeah,
you kind of are pushing the return on equity.
I brought that money to New Jersey.
Gotcha. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Any of your Jersey properties, are they all cash flowing, or are there some that are like a little negative? And what would you do in that situation? Then wait for the equity to grow, or would you offload them?
Good question. There's one that's not great. They're all cash flowing. I mean, like if you have an eviction of one, it's not cash flowing, right? But I mean, taken as a group, it's cash flowing, doing really well. And I think nothing is really bad. And this was kind of the amazing thing. Like I paid, most people would have said at the time, slightly above market. But I also had seller financing. Seller was paying the closing costs and all those things. So the packaging worked really well for me. So I was able to get in these very high leverage, and they were in the middle of still appreciating like crazy. And the rental appreciation in Jersey, you may know, is crazy. It's still there.
Yeah. All right. Couple last questions for you. We ask these to every guest.
Okay.
What separates top performing real estate investors from the rest of the crowd?
I'm going to go with, you know, when you have an opportunity and you have the pieces together, you got to pull the trigger. But also it takes work to even get yourself in that position, right? So Jersey would have never happened if I hadn't, you know, done a huge amount of work myself on a bunch of different things. So leveraging your skill set, knowing what you're good at, which for me, knowing myself sometimes is a weakness. I don't know. That depends on the person.
I like that answer. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
What is a daily habit that contributes to your success?
People call me, always answer. You know, tenants always call, always answer. Contributes, you know, trying to diffuse situations. It's a people business, you know, trying to diffuse situations as much as possible. I mean, you know, everybody says a good work ethic, obviously. Yeah.
I like it.
I mean, there's so many pieces of it. It's hard to, you know.
That's fair.
Yeah.
What's a piece of advice that you'd give yourself if you were starting again?
I think for me, don't get into an asset that's going to consume your life for years. Unless, I mean, for years and years and years. I think, you know, I mean, there's a point where that makes sense. In my particular journey, it would have been better for me to buy something that needed, you know, not quite so much work, and then be able to keep rolling that.
Okay.
Yeah. But
do you have a favorite real estate or business book?
I do a lot of podcasts.
Podcast it is. What's your favorite?
Probably Collecting Keys right now.
Collecting Keys
is my favorite.
Anybody listen to that? Anyone know it?
Collecting Keys.
Okay.
Also, Bigger Pockets has an On the Market, which is it's okay. But Collecting Keys, that's the one that I've been benefiting the most from recently.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Sounds good. Last question for you. What is the biggest non-monetary benefit you've gotten from investing?
It's fun.
Fun.
It's fun. I think it's fun. I like playing Monopoly. Tell people I play Monopoly for a living. You know, go around the board in my little boat. Go to jail every so often. Argue about the rent. You know, it's like
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for being here. Definitely come talk to John afterwards because he has some very fun stories that we just can't put on camera, but definitely always entertaining. So before we head to networking, I like doing a quick outro so everyone can kind of get a feel of who's doing what. So if you're any of these things, just raise your hand. And if you need one of those things, obviously talk to that person. But any full-time investors here? Very cool. Any syndicators? Very cool. Who has not bought a property yet but wants to? Cool. Who owns, let's say, under 10 doors? 20 plus? Okay. What? No. Sorry, 10 plus. I'm not doing that. 11 to 20?
11 to 20 categories.
Property managers?
Yeah.
What?
Somewhat.
Property managers. We're skipping units. We're done with that one. All right, very cool. Insurance. Lenders. Contractors. Oh, we're in need. Okay. Real estate agents. Awesome. Very cool. Who's looking for a deal? Every hand should be coming up. Okay. Anybody selling a deal right now? Sort of, kinda. Sort of, kinda. All right. Make an offer. All right. Cool. Guys, that's going to wrap us up. One last thing before we head to networking is I'm starting a real estate mentorship, and I'm testing it out with 5 or 10 people. Just going through the ropes. So if anybody hasn't gotten started, wants to get started, doesn't know where to start, I'd love to talk to you and see if it's a fit. I can give you more details afterwards. So with that being said, I want to give John a round of applause. Thank you for being here and your story. And thank you for Gary, who is not here for sponsoring this and all the food and drink, but hang out, network. Thanks, guys. So.
Thank you. Yeah.